Good afternoon, Tiger Bay. Great to have you all here. My name is Tim Center. I'm a board member and past president, chairman, and a bunch of other stuff that when I used to be. I will be glad at this point to invite Senator Lorraine Osley up to the stage to introduce our speaker. She is an Ironman athlete, or an Ironwoman athlete. Mom, the legislator. Lorraine brings passion and commitment on behalf of the entire community, and we very rarely get a chance to thank some of our members who serve us. More than 12 years in the Florida legislature. Known across the state as a champion for all of Florida's children, from leading the effort to create Whole Child Leon to her current leadership in bringing about the purpose-built communities in the South Side. Always focused on real problems and real solutions. Since her election to the Florida Senate, Lorraine has gone to work expanding access to broadband and child care. She's also worked across the aisle to secure more than $40 million in Florida's budget to benefit 11 counties of Senate District 3. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm Tiger Bay welcome to Senator Lorraine Osley.
Thank you all so much. It is a pleasure to be amongst people. In spite of that introduction, Tim. But I first want to introduce one of my colleagues, Representative Hunchofsky from Parkland, formerly the mayor of the city of Parkland. So welcome to the Capital Tiger Bay. But it is really an honor to introduce today's guest speaker. Desmond Meade is a formerly homeless returning citizen who has overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles to become the president of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, the chair of Floridians for a Fair Democracy, graduate of Miami-Dade College, graduate of Florida International University College of Law, and a Ford Global Fellow. Most of us here, of course, know him through his tireless efforts in leading the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition to a historic victory in 2018 with the successful passage of Amendment 4, a grassroots citizens initiative which restored voting rights to over 1.4 million Floridians with past felony convictions, the greatest expansion of voting rights in Florida's history. In 2019, Desmond was named the Floridian and Central Floridian of the Year, and he was recognized by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Today, Desmond leads efforts to empower and civically re-engage local communities across the state and to reshape local, state, and national criminal justice policies. The coolest thing is that in September of this year, he was awarded a Macarthur Fellowship, which people commonly refer to as a Genius Grant. This is a $625,000 no strings attached stipend, which is awarded based on three things: exceptional creativity, a track record of significant accomplishments, and a potential for the grant to enable future creative work. So we are waiting to see that future creative work, Desmond. Just last month, Desmond learned that more of his own civil rights have been restored, which means, listen to this, that now he can run for office, serve on a jury, and take the bar exam to become a lawyer. Meade's profile on the Macarthur Foundation website reads that despite setbacks, his bold vision for empowering returning citizens through mobilization and education serves as a blueprint for other states to follow. And Meade is pushing the nation closer to a democracy that better represents the full extent of its citizens. I can't think of a time where we need our nation to closer represent the full extent of its citizens. So please join me in welcoming Desmond Meade to Capital Tiger Bay.
Wow. So I definitely didn't want to be on stage while I was being introduced because, it's not too often I get to hear nice things come out of the mouth of politicians when they talk about it. But it is indeed almost a pleasure to be here this morning. And I say almost because, when I was first invited to speak at the Tiger Bay Club here in Tallahassee, I got extremely excited because my experience has taught me anytime you're invited to speak at Tiger Bay, they always give you this nice, cute, fluffy, stuffed tiger. And every time I get a tiger, one of my kids eventually steals it from me. And so I was looking forward to finally owning my own little stuffed tiger. And so it was with great anticipation that I showed up here today. I even, listen to this, I caught the red coach up here today. Genius on the coach. And my primary focus was that stuffed tiger that I know I'm going to be caressing right now. But Mr. Senator, unfortunately, he informed me that you all don't engage in that practice. So, unfortunately, I am not as enthused as I would be when I had to receive that tiger. So I'm pretty sure he's writing that note down, note to self, always have a tiger for the guest speaker. Right? Anyway, I am, a couple of housekeeping notes here. I brought with me today 2 copies of my recently published book, Let My People Vote. And one of those copies is exclusively reserved for David Johnson. You may affectionately know him as DJ. And I just wanted to publicly acknowledge DJ's role in my life and in the movement to re-enfranchise over 1.4 million Floridians. Thank you so much, DJ. And then the other book is actually for the lucky Tiger Bay club member who asked me the most controversial and thought-provoking question during the Q&A. And it's sitting right up here for you, so give it your best shot, y'all. But really, I'm definitely honored to be here. I always, jump at the opportunity to speak to a bunch of dysfunctional professionals that like to come together and eat lunch and make fun of themselves in the process. It's always been adventurous, but most of all, I think it's just an opportunity to spread a message. When Congressman, thank you so much for the introduction, but when she said about she's looking forward to see what I'm going to do with the Macarthur Genius Award, a lot of people look at the money. That's a lot of money. I'm still trying to process that. I need a good Republican lawyer to help me with my taxes, please. No, seriously, this is not a joke. I told my wife, listen, we're going to have to switch parties. We're going to have to get a tax lawyer that's a Republican because they know how to work those loopholes. And I'm, unfortunately, in a new tax bracket that I have no knowledge of, never been familiar with, and I need some help real quick. But it's actually the Macarthur, to me, the Macarthur Genius Award is less about the money and more about the opportunities. And what I mean by that is that I'm already putting the Macarthur Genius Award to work because it's a huge megaphone. Matter of fact, I was told that the only higher award that an American citizen can get after the Macarthur Genius is the Nobel Peace Prize. That's how prestigious the Genius Grant is. And so it gives me a bigger megaphone to really advance the message that I think is so important. A message of love, a message of really bringing together a country, bringing together our communities. A message that says that in spite of our differences, there's so much that binds us together. And if we could focus on that more than what divides us, that we will become a much greater nation and a much greater leader in the world today. And so that, I think, just me getting that award is the Macarthur Genius Award at work already. All right, and that's probably what got me here today, right? But who am I? I want to just take you on a short journey with me, and some of that is in my book. And if you are interested, please make sure you go to Amazon and look up Let My People Vote. It's actually an audiobook as well, and my wife made me record it in my own voice. So if you love audiobooks, and you hate that Siri-sounding author that narrates these books, you don't have to worry about it with this one. You can actually hear my own voice. But I go back to August of 2005, and I found myself standing in front of railroad tracks in South Florida on a hot, humid August day. You know, I always tell folks that it was so hot and humid that I remember seeing a dog chase a cat, and they were both walking. And believe me, I didn't say that to make you laugh. It happened in reality. But, but for a few moments, I was actually able to block out that oppressive heat and humidity, because the only thing that was going through my mind was thinking about how much pain I would have to endure after I jumped in front of an oncoming train. See, that day that I was standing there, I was a broken man. I was at my very bottom. And I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and I was ready to go. You know, I was raised in a Christian family, and I know that my parents loved me, and I loved my parents, but I know that my parents did not envision me being at that place at that moment. I didn't even envision that. You know, when I was a kid playing with other kids in the sandbox, and you know, Billy was talking about when he grew up, he wanted to be a police officer, and Karen was saying she wanted to be a doctor or a nurse. I didn't say, man, when I grow up, I want to be a crackhead, and I want to be a convict, and I want to be standing in front of railroad tracks getting ready to kill myself. That's not what I envisioned, but there I was that day. And, you know, I tell the story of the night before, or the day before, when I was at a homeless shelter, and I was calling a friend because I just wanted to get some money so I could buy some more drugs and get high. And that friend, when I called him, said, well, I don't have money for you, but I think I have something a little bit better. And he said, if you could just get to this pastor I know and have her pray for you, your life is going to improve. And I remember, thinking about that moment when something just came over me and said, well, I've got to get to this pastor. And when I looked in my pockets, I didn't have enough money to catch the bus all the way there, but I could at least get most of the way there. And so I spent the last bit of change I had in my pocket, and I caught the bus as far as I could take it, and I walked maybe a mile or so to this church, which happened to be open in the middle of the week. Because I never thought about whether or not the church was going to be open that day. I didn't know if they were having services or not. I just knew I had to get there, and I went there. And surprisingly, the church was open and service was just getting ready to begin. And I remember walking in, and as service was beginning, and I went to the back, and I sat through the entire service, and my presence there rekindled some of my memories, because my dad was a preacher and a pastor. Right, and I was raised the right way. I was raised in the church, and I knew right from wrong, but somehow or another, I got off that path. But as I was sitting there and I was reminiscing of the times of my upbringing, and I was really getting into the service, and I really enjoyed it. And I remember at the end of the service, I approached the pastor, and I was like, Pastor, my name is Desmond. I am an addict, I am homeless, but I am not here for money, I am not here for clothes, right? But a friend of mine told me that if I could just come to you and ask you to pray for me, that my life would be okay. And I remember she put her hands on my shoulder and she pointed to another gentleman in the church and said, you see that man over there? I'm like, yes. She said, go to him and make an appointment for tomorrow. And I remember when she told me that, I was screaming in my head. I'm like, woman, don't you realize how desperate I am? That all I'm asking is for is prayer, and you're telling me that I have to wait until tomorrow, that I have to make an appointment for you just to take a moment and pray for me? And I remember when she directed me to this gentleman, I didn't go to him. I just walked out the door. And the thought that ran through my head as I was walking out the door was, man, even God has turned his back on me. And that night, I remember for the first time ever, I was homeless for many years. But that night, I remember just not caring anymore, and I slept on a bus bench for the very first time in my life. You see, when I was homeless and addicted to drugs, that was nothing for me to be proud of, and I used to hide from it because I didn't want my friends or my family to see me in that state of being. And so I would sleep behind the Dipsy dumps. I would sleep in an abandoned building. I would sleep somewhere hidden so the rest of the world wouldn't see me in the state that I was in. But that night, I lost it all, and I said, I don't care. And I slept on a bus bench where anyone who was driving by would see, wow, that's Desmond. I didn't care anymore. And that next morning when I awoke, as I was walking somewhere and I approached those railroad tracks, I thought about the story that I read a couple weeks prior where a gentleman killed himself by suicide by train. And I was so fixated in that I could not cross those tracks. And so that day, as things were running through my mind, I was stuck and I could not move. And even though I tell folks I'm a wimp, I'm scared of needles. I don't like pain. But even the thought of the pain that I had to endure was not enough to make me move. And so I stood there and I waited and I waited. I was tired. I was ashamed. I was dejected. I was rejected. I had no self-esteem, and I waited and I waited. But God had other plans. And for some reason, He would not allow that train to come. And I'm standing in front of the railroad tracks that lead to the port of Miami, the busiest port on the East Coast that led to the fruit and produce district, where a train runs every 10 minutes. But that day it wouldn't come, and I ended up crossing those tracks, and I walked a couple blocks further, and I checked myself into drug treatment. And, after completing drug treatment, I moved back into a homeless shelter. And while there, my motivation was that I just did not want to get high anymore. I didn't want to go through this vicious cycle of relapsing and recovery. It was draining. And I felt that if I would relapse one more time and end up in front of railroad tracks, this time I would not be as lucky. And the only thing that I could think about was maybe if I get an education and that would increase my self-esteem, and maybe I won't relapse again. And so I enrolled at Miami-Dade College in its paralegal program, and I ended up graduating at the top of my class, and my professors encouraged me to continue my education. And so I pursued a bachelor's degree in public safety management with a concentration in criminal justice. You see, I figured that I had a lot of experience getting arrested and appearing in front of judges, and somehow or another that experience was going to actually be beneficial in my studies. And it was, and I ended up graduating with highest honors. And the next thing you know, Florida International University was one of a few colleges that decided to take a shot, decided to take a chance on this addict, on this homeless person, on this person with a criminal history. They decided to look at the person. And in May of 2014, I ended up crossing the stage and receiving my Juris Doctorate degree from Florida International University College of Law. And you can clap now about that. Because that was no small feat, right? I mean, just several years ago, I remember, there used to be a time, I tell folks, when, the only time that a state attorney would want to talk to me is when they're trying to charge me with a crime, and the only time a judge would want to have a conversation with me was to tell me how much time I was going to get. But today it's a totally a different story. But even after accomplishing the things that I accomplished, as a matter of fact, I tell folks that when I was at those railroad tracks, if someone would have told me, Desmond, don't jump in front of that train, because in a few years you're going to be sitting on boards with commissioners and mayors, and you're going to have like attorney generals that you can count on as a friend, and you're going to meet the president not once, but maybe 2 times. And you might even eventually lead an organization that would re-enfranchise 1.4 million people. You're going to be Time Magazine 100. You're going to be a genius. Don't jump in front of that train. If someone would have told me that day, you know what the first question I would have asked them? Where did they get that good drugs? And I probably would have put them in a headlock and made them take me, we call that, to the trap to get that good dope. Because there's no way that you could have convinced me that a person like me, in a matter of a few years, would have been able to accomplish the things that I've been able to accomplish. There was no way. As a matter of fact, you know, at that time I would think that something like that is impossible. Right? And I say that because there's 2 things, if nothing else, that you get from me today. There's 2 things that I want you to leave with. Number 1 is that I used to tell people to take the word impossible out of your vocabulary, because all things are possible when you have God on your side. Right? Especially when you're willing to serve others, right? But now, you know, I've reinserted the word impossible in my vocabulary, and I encourage so many people to do so because I just redefined impossible. See, impossible is not impossible anymore. Impossible really means that I'm possible, right? I'm possible. Like when I was recognized by Time Magazine and I was at the gala, and I'm fussing with the editors of Time and saying, how in the hell you put The Rock on that cover of that Time 100 edition? Why would you put The Rock, Dwayne Johnson? That was a huge fail. You should have put me on there, right? And it wasn't, I didn't say it because of my conceit, which I might have a little bit of that, but I didn't say it because of that at the time. I said it because if I was on the cover, every single person that looked at that magazine would realize that you don't have to be a movie star, you don't have to be rich, you don't have to be a celebrity, you don't have to be an athlete, hell, you don't even have to be a politician to have an impact on people's lives. And that if that person who was homeless, if that person who was a drug addict, if that person who was in and out of prison could transform his life to the point where he is impacting not only the state of Florida, but this country and the world, then that means that every single person looking at that cover, every single person in here, no matter what is going on with your life, have the potential to be one of the 100 most influential people in the world, which means you have the potential to do something great. And the sky is the limit for you all. So that's message number 1 that I need you to leave out of here with as you're going up the escalator. I need you to think that I can be a Macarthur genius. I can be Time 100. I said, because I can serve, and I know how to serve with love. The other message that I hope that you leave here with, and I'm not ending, I'm like a Baptist preacher. I'll make you think I'm ending, but I'm not really ending. The other message is that when I told my story, right? When I was telling my story, when I was talking about how I thought I was rejected by God, when I was talking about standing in front of those railroad tracks, your heart, your mind did not see a black person. You didn't see a Democrat. You didn't see a Republican. You didn't see any of those labels. What you connected with was my humanity. And you was actually able to allow yourself to be drawn into that story in a very profound way. Because you saw my humanity. And I know with me so many times prior to my experience, I would drive down the street and I would see that homeless person, I would see that drug addict. And I always looked at them as those folks. And every now and then, I never imagined that those folks could actually be a very impactful member of our society. Thought they were lost. Thought people in prison were lost. they would never be a part of us. I didn't realize until I became them and went through that process. And understand that no matter what position a person is in today, your interaction, your proximity to me right now should have a transformative impact. And when you leave this place and you see that homeless person, you can no longer say that they would never amount to anything. You could no longer look at a person that's been impacted by the criminal justice system and say that they're irredeemable. You would never look at the drug addict. You can never look at that drug addict and just look at him and think, man, that's what's wrong with our society. And now you can look at him and maybe we can take that person and make what's right with our society. That you would never, ever be able to look at any one of our marginalized communities or individuals and just write them off. Because all of those people, that drug addict, that homeless person, that convict is Desmond Meade. And maybe, just maybe, when we see these individuals, instead of looking at their situation, maybe we can connect with the humanity that's inside of every single one. And that's that driving force that helped guide our work around Amendment 4. You know, I remember when I was in drug treatment, one of the stories I want to share is that my friend, Frank Hernandez, he had a son that went to, I think, Tallahassee Community College or Tallahassee State College, and he was murdered while he was up there. His friend accidentally discharged a shotgun and killed his son, Morris. And I remember going to the funeral, and Morris was Jewish, Frank was Cuban, and it was a Jewish funeral. And I remember the rabbi was telling the story of the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, how those two bodies of water in the Middle East were so vastly different from each other, that one was dead and void of life, while the other body of water was vibrant and full of life. And he said, and in the story he was telling how both of those bodies of water got their nutrients from the same source. Same source. And so his question was, how could it be that these two bodies of water that get their nutrients from the same source be so vastly different? And his answer was a very simple answer. The Dead Sea is what it is because every blessings and nutrients that it received, it held on to it. It was self-enclosed. Which meant that as it held on to the blessings that it received, it eventually became oversaturated and it killed itself from within. While the Sea of Galilee had tributaries, which meant that any time it received blessings, it passed it on to other bodies of water, which created a natural filtration system. And when I heard that story, I thought, man, that's so indicative of life. That we may see people who seem to have it all, but on the inside, they're dead. They're void of love and joy, and they're tasked to even be around. While you can see other folks who may not have as much, but be such a joy to be around, and they're just so full of love and compassion. Because they pass the blessings on. And so I learned early on at the funeral that, man, listen, if I want to have a joyful life, that I need to pass those blessings on. And it translated into the campaign that my desire when I was in treatment and I was getting on my knees and I was talking to God and saying, God, I don't know where you're going to take me, but wherever it is you take me, I'm going to let folks know who got me here. And God, listen, I'm not asking for the house or the wife or the career or the job or none of that. Only thing I wanted was for you to give me wisdom, strength, perseverance, discernment to do your work. Which meant that my job was to figure out how can I make my community, my society, a better place. For who? Not for the returning citizen, but for everybody. And so when I was on my knees praying, and even though I have not met many of you, guess what? I was praying for you. Even you, Gus. Even you. And I was praying for you because I recognized the humanity in you and because I loved you and I didn't even meet you yet. That's what my job was. As God gave me a second chance, because I could have been dead, I could have been in prison. But I had the opportunity. That train didn't come because I was given an assignment. And that assignment was to fight to the death for each and every one of you. And I literally mean that. DJ, you know when I got sick real bad and was in the hospital, I was making campaign decisions to right out of surgery. Willing to sacrifice my life for each and every one of you. And I didn't give a damn what party you belong to. I didn't give a damn if you liked me or not. I didn't give a damn if you was racist. I didn't give a damn if you was atheist. It didn't matter. Because above all of that, you were still a human being. And you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And that's what I was fighting for. And I figured that if we could champion the cause for the most despised people in our society, if we can learn to love them, my God, what a great nation we'll be. That's what I fought for. You know, I tell the story, matter of fact, Tim, listen, you driving down I-10. I say you're driving down I-10 because you want to go to Disney World, right? And you know what I-10 is famous for. I-10 is like the second cousin of I-4, right? It's always going to be some accident that's going to stop and block the only mode of getting there, you know, and you actually are driving down to get to Disney World. Before you can get on 75 South, you run across an accident. And there's someone laying on the street. And you, because you are the sinner who you are, decides to get out of your car. And you see someone laying on the ground and you run up to that person. I promise you all, Tim's first question is not going to be, did you vote for Donald Trump? It's not even going to be how much money you make. It's not going to be what's your sexual identity. Are you a legal immigrant? It's not going to be any of that. Tim's first questions are either going to be, are you okay? Or how can I help? We embrace that feeling, that environment in our campaign. And what does that mean? That means that I believe in the depths of my heart that when the kiss me hit the fan, or the kimchi hit the fan, y'all know about kimchi. When the kimchi hit the fan, that at the end of the day, what connects us is going to overwhelm everything. Just think about it. When we seen, unfortunately, the events at Surfside, and I seen those first responders just digging in that rubble as if their own loved one was there. No one cared about people's immigration status or who they voted for. It's in those moments that we are great. It's in those moments that I am the most proudest to be an American citizen. I am the most proudest to be a human being on this earth. Because it's in those moments that we really, really display how God has really intended us to act with each other. That in spite of the things that label us or divide us, in spite of all of that, what can overwhelm that is our love for humanity, our connection with humanity, and what we care about is the human being that's in suffering. We see that after hurricanes. And I believe that we don't have to wait for tragedies to be able to love each other that way. We don't have to wait for car accidents or tornadoes or buildings to collapse. Why should we? We can live that way every single day. And more than anything else, that is the spirit of Amendment 4. And that's why we continue to do the work that we do, and that in spite of whatever is said by the media, in spite of whatever is said by politicians, we remain true to our course, which is placing people over politics and looking at obstacles as opportunities to bring this country together, as opportunities to lift up the humanity in each and every one of us, as opportunities to love. To love. And that's what we've seen in November of 2018. When over 1 million Republicans voted yes on Amendment 4. More people voted for us than, my mic went off like I was getting kicked off or something. Okay. I just seemed like the mic went off. But that day when we had, because I was getting ready to talk about the governor, somebody cut off the mic. I know he has a staff member somewhere in here. Yeah, that's why I refused when I made a mistake to say pardon me, right? All right, we got the slow side on the right. But that night when more people, 1 million more people voted for Amendment 4 than any of the candidates that ran for governor, right? I was most proudest of the fact that those 5.1 million votes were not votes that was based on hate or fear, but rather votes that was based on love, forgiveness, and redemption. And we showed the state of Florida, we showed the world, we showed this country that love can in fact win the day. That we don't have to tear each other down in order to move major policy issues. We took the most controversial subject in the most controversial state at the most controversial time, and we were able to successfully pass that with no opposition. That's the power of love. And I tell you, it truly can overcome everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Desmond. Thank you, Desmond, and also thank you. It didn't sound like it went out. It sounds like it went out. For bringing back humanity. That's awesome. And when I was going up, I was just going to ask the guy in the accident if he knew a good tax attorney. That was all I was going to ask. By the way, Desmond bought everybody lunch today, so thank you also for that. That was fantastic. We have questions from members. Steve Berkman's up first.
Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Steve.
And I really just want to thank you so very deeply in my heart for making me think for about 7 seconds that I could be a Macarthur Genius Award.
7 seconds.
Would have been better if I had actually got it now, right? Question to you is that Amendment 4, went through the process, it was voted on, and then became at least my opinion, the difficult part of actually trying to implement it through the legislature, the various court cases, just all of that. How did you deal with the anger? Because I know there's got to be some.
That's a great question. I think it was more about disappointment. We got, like I said, on election night, we celebrated, that Love Won the Day. I think we were able to really create something that was beautiful in Amendment 4. Something we did everything within our power to keep our campaign elevated above partisan politics, even above implicit racial biases, right? And we wanted to keep it in that space. And so it was a beautiful moment, only to be destroyed by a combination of two things. One is the audacity, and please, politicians in the room, please excuse me, but the audacity of politicians. And what I mean by the audacity, I think I was somewhat offended and a little disappointed because for many years, the policy has been in place for about 150 years. And there were, I know for the last 15, 20 years, every year there was some kind of legislation to deal with it, but it never got out of committee. And so, the politicians that's been in Tallahassee for many years had the opportunity to actually deal with it themselves. I believe that the greatest display of citizenship is a person being able to vote. And the second greatest display of citizenship is when the community comes together and it says to politicians, well, we gave you an opportunity to deal with something, you refused to. So now we're going to take matters in our own hands, because at the end of the day, we've got to understand that all rights originated with us individually. And we actually acquiesced some of those rights in order to create a union, in order to create a community, in which we can collectively live together in safety, right, and in prosperity. And so we acquiesce some of those rights to people to handle affairs on our behalf. And so when they're not doing that, then we have a right to reclaim our time, reclaim our power. And one of the ways that we do it is through an initiative. And so we did that. And after we completed that, then politicians had the audacity to say, okay, well, we need to tell you how to do it, which I kind of created this story. Homeless person, homeless family on the street, forever and a day, it rained, sleet, and snow, and the politician will walk past that family for years and will not even lift a finger. But finally, the community comes together and say, no, we're going to build that family a home. The community comes together and build that family a home, and as soon as they build a home, here comes the politician trying to demand that they determine how it's furnished. That's the audacity of a politician to think that we don't know enough, or we don't know better, and that they're the only people that can decide how we treat each other. And so I was offended by that. I don't know if I was angry yet, but how I decided to respond to that. You know, Martin Luther King said, fear can't defeat fear, hate can't defeat hate. But the one thing that can conquer all of that is love. And so I would refuse to engage in any kind of partisan nonsense, and we just kept focused on people, right? And we just drove through it and said, we're gonna love you to death. You might be, you know, whatever word people want to use, but at the end of the day, we're gonna deal with you, but our North Star is always gonna be about what can we do to make our communities better. Thank you for that question.
Dominic Claps.
Thank you, Desmond, thank you so much. First of all, thank you for your journey of transformation and redemption. It's just very, very moving and inspiring. You were raised properly and loved, as you said. So what would you tell that young Desmond before you went off on that wrong path, which maybe you had to, but what would you tell that young Desmond today? 1, 2, or 3 things.
Only one thing I would tell him. That one girl in elementary that broke my heart, right, to stay away from her. Don't even ask her to be your girlfriend, right? Because let me tell you, the last period of the day, I was able to send that note over, and she actually checked yes. You know, we did the box question though. Do you like me, yes or no? And she checked yes. And by the time we got to the candy store across the street, she approached me and said, I'm no longer your girlfriend. And that has haunted me for the rest of my life. And so that's the one.
Girl made you do it.
Hey, let me tell
Made you do
you.
it.
But you know, that's very interesting because I've been asked that question before. And you know what? I would not tell myself anything else because I realized today, you know, that all of that pain and that suffering that I went through was designed. I do believe that God took me through that, right, in order to prepare me to be of greater service to Him. Right, that when we go through trials and tribulations, right, it is actually a training ground to create that testimony that, and it's not for you, it's not for me, right? It's for others, right? That when we go through things, and there are people in this audience right now that have been through some things, right? That probably are facing some things right now, and there's somewhere some things are coming at you in the future. No Gus, please get the no Gus. When those things happen, right? I mean, anybody here is into athletics? Any doctors in the house? Raise your hand if you're a doctor. See, that's the problem. There's no doctors in here, right? But one of the things that I learned is that we can only get stronger, right? The only way you can get muscle is by tearing muscle. You have to tear the muscle in order for new muscle to grow as the tearing muscle is older. And the only way you can tear your muscle is by you have to experience some type of resistance, right, that causes that tissue to tear. And so what I do know is that you become stronger when you're taken through trials, when you're taken through things that create those tensions, right? And so I don't, you know, I tell them, people, don't run from it. Embrace it, because we come out of that much stronger and much wiser. We come out of there a better us, right? Which means that now we have the position to help even more people. So I would not change a thing other than that girl. And I'm not going to mention her name.
Thank you.
Thank you, Desmond. Thank you. Thank you very
Is
much.
that it?
Yeah, that's it. You're
That's it? There's only 2 members of Tiger Bay?
Well, there's only 2 that are, yeah.
Oh, only 2 that wanted to ask a
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, Brian
Okay.
Armstrong, last one.
I was debating asking this, but I had a dear friend, he became a friend of mine in the 70s and 80s, particularly when I was in law school. He was a fellow who grew up in poverty, he was Jesuit educated, he went off to Vietnam, came back and he was homeless. And he had the same kind of epiphany that I heard you talk about, Desmond. And he was homeless in Washington, D.C., he organized the homeless there. He ended up creating a group called Community of Creative Nonviolence. He got so powerful, met so many people. I don't know if he got on Time Magazine's cover, but he came close. He brought cases to the Florida Supreme Court on behalf of the homeless. He ran into obstacle after obstacle, and he did kill himself. And after he did that, unfortunately, everything just fell apart. I mean, the Community of Creative Nonviolence fell apart. The homeless lost their representation. So my question to you is, you've come a long, long way, obviously. You're a figurehead for your movement. Have you and do you believe that should something happen and befall to you, have you set everything up to the point that you believe people are going to, you've had such an impact, people will continue your efforts, and people are going to fight for 1.4 million who don't have the right to vote right now?
Wow.
You wanted
See,
the last question.
I told you that,
Yeah, you
right?
wanted the last question.
And I needed, that little trifecta because I was saying, okay, I have to give this book away, and I just needed 3 people. And what's that gentleman in the back? The second question. Dominic, man, you was like right there. He came and just snatched this book right out of your hands. You were right there. Oh, you were right there. If I wouldn't have insisted, you would have got. But he just came and snatched it right out. Wow, you're almost like the University of Miami when they played Ohio State. Really, just we had everything, and then they came and cheated and took our victory away from us. And he's sitting at my table. Neil probably told him, ask this question. But no, that's a great question because a friend of mine has asked me that many years ago. About if I were to die, would the movement go on? And one of the things that it helped me understand was that, matter of fact, it's actually I think will help protect me because maybe if somebody's out there that want to take my life, thinking that it would end the movement, once they know that it won't end the movement, it's probably going to help enhance the movement. That they probably won't take my life. But that has been a driving force to make sure that even though, I am that person that is out front, that there are so many other great leaders. My brother here, Neil. Neil, stand up, please. He is my brother for real. I hope some people see the resemblance. But, he's my brother to the fact that, I love him, and sometimes I tear up when I think about him. His mom adopted me, so he has no choice but to claim me now. But to have people like Neil, and so many others that I've really just grown to be like, listen, I can step away and it's still going to go because this is number one. It's not a unique fight. It's really righteous. It's really commonplace. It's a fight around love. It's a fight around respecting humanity. And there's so many people in here I know that believe in that. And so I do believe that the movement will go on. I hope it will because I don't want to be here 5 years from now leading anything. I want to be on some island in Tahiti enjoying my Macarthur Genius Grant winnings. All right, that's right. I think I deserve it, and so that's where I want to be. But I think that there are so many other great people that's around and are emerging that's going to continue to help push it. But right now, I'm just wanting to populate, and just sow the seed, keep sowing the seed, and there's going to be people that's going to be emerging from the depths of hell to be our leaders, because God always chooses the least among a group of people to bring about the biggest change. Understand that. And being a leader, a true leader, means that you have to go through some type of pain, some type of passage that grooms you. And I know that there's a lot of people out there experiencing pain, which means that we have a great pool of future leaders.
Ladies and gentlemen, Desmond Meade.